Hello and welcome to another Purveyor of Light Lightroom quick tip. Today we're going to do a landscape edit using my methods to go through, and hopefully you'll pick up a few pointers along the way or find useful at least. So I've got an image here in front of me, and the first thing I do with any image that I am going to process is I look over the whole frame and I look what is distracting, what is taking my eye, what is weak, what is strong. And right off the bat, what gets me is over here on the right, this tree. Okay, this pine tree here is definitely, it's almost in shadow, okay? And it's very mudded, okay? And that is drawing my eye. It's ruining the frame to me because, of course, the focal point is the cross here on the mound. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to affect some of the darks, the blacks, the shadows, and so forth. And the rest I'll do by taste, okay? Because I want to control, if you remember when you're editing a photo, especially a landscape, pick what is your focal point. Okay, what is it? Okay, in this case, my focal point is the cross. That's the point of attention. Okay, and so as humans, our eyes are drawn to light. All right, and so therefore I want that to be the lightest to draw the eye. Okay, so this right here is distracting. So I'm going to use the histogram, okay, to do my edits, my basic edits on here. And a lot of people don't even realize that you can edit right from the histogram. And it's actually my preferred way of doing it. Of course, most people come down and they start messing with the sliders, okay? But I find it easier to keep my eye on the photo and then just go up to the histogram. And you'll notice here, I'm hovering over and it says at the bottom, as I hover and it highlights an area, it says, these are the blacks. If you do anything here, it's going to affect the blacks. If I go to the right, it says, you're going to affect the shadows over here. If I continue to the right, it says you're going to affect the general exposure of the image. And if I keep going to the right, it says highlights. This is where I'm going to adjust the highlights. And the last is the whites. Okay, so if you look over, just hover your mouse over and you can see the shaded areas go active. Now, as I go over the active areas, you can also see, if you pay down here on the sliders, okay, you could see that when I'm over in the histogram, certain sliders are going active. You can see that through there. A lot of people don't realize that this is capable here. So I'm going to edit this photo using the histogram. So I'm selecting over in the blacks. Okay, so I'm hovering over in the blacks. And now I just simply click and press and drag left or right to adjust the blacks. So I'm going to show you how that works. Click. And now if I drag to the right, notice the black gets thrown over. If I go over to the left, it gets thrown there. And I'm doing it from the histogram. Okay. So just coming into the histogram and then clicking and then dragging and then moving the image is how I'm going to edit. Okay? And again, I'm looking at the image and not being concerned about which slider I'm on, and so forth and so on. Then I go to the shadows and I can drag them, and you can see how I'm bringing up the shadows, especially look at the pine tree in that. So I'm going to bring up the shadows quite a bit. Then I'll come over to the general exposure and I can drag it all the way left or all the way right. I find this is a very nice technique to actually doing your adjustments. All right, and now I'm in my next section, which is the highlights. and I can pull them over. And again, don't be afraid to pull your mouse left and right to see what's happening in the image. It'll give you more intuitive things, what's going on. And I'm also watching the histogram, sorry. If I'm pushing things over too far to the right, I get a clipping warning. If I push things over to the right, I may get a shadow warning where I'm losing detail. So I'm using that information as well as working with it. Okay? And with the highlights, I don't want to lose any information, but I sure do want to have the information. All right? And after the highlights, I have the whites themselves. So I can pull the whites all the way over. Okay? And I can pull them in accordingly. Okay? And again, using the histogram, I could see, now I'm clipping. Okay? Now I'm clipping, and I can pull it using the histogram back. And you could see that the warning is clipping. Okay? And I'm using that information just to draw it in, okay? And there we go. So now I know I'm at the whites where I'm not clipping because I watched the histogram warnings here and here, okay, where I can see what's going on, okay? So again, use the histogram's information. That's what it's there for. You see where I'm clipping? Okay, look at the picture now. Look at all the red. That's the purpose of the histogram, is to turn around and use that information and don't have any clipping. And now I have a perfectly exposed histogram. Okay. Now, look at the pine tree here, and it's in blue. Okay. I'm clipping some of the information here. Okay. Again, my histogram will tell me, well, I'm still clipping. So it's in the shadows, right? This is your information. The more you get comfortable understanding the histogram, the better, okay? The more you get to understand, okay, so the shadows, I'm bringing up the shadows, okay? Now, so I recommend take some time, take some of your photos, and start editing by using the histogram, okay? And look at all the sliders. The sliders have all been moved based on what I did in the histogram, okay? So it's a great way to edit, okay? And and in my opinion, it's a more informative way to edit because it does give you the information. It allows you to see if you're pushing or clipping and so forth. Okay? There's nothing wrong with either method. I just prefer this method for general editing. That gives me the basic edits of the photo, and then I go from there as I come down through the sliders. Okay? And now that I've done the whole top section, okay, I can come in and then continue on editing the photo. Okay? And again, looking at the histogram is giving me the information that I need. All right. I can really bring in the clarity if I wish, but it makes all things a little bit too crunchy. Dehaze. Not a fan of the dehaze, to be honest. But you could really bring in some information using the dehaze. I like a little bit of atmosphere in my photos myself. And of course, vibrance. Vibrance is good because it doesn't affect if you had any skin tones or people in there. It tries to protect those skin tones. Okay. If you're not having any humans in the photo like that, then you might be better off using saturation. Okay. And between the two. So my rule of thumb is I'll use vibrance if there's humans in it. All right. Otherwise, I will use saturation. Okay. And you can't be heavy-handed because you can see how terrible it takes the photo when you go there. But a little bit goes a long way. Okay, so now continuing on, going down the tone curve. Again, I will, let's take a general S curve, a couple points on the thing. I will do a traditional S curve. So I'm going to drop the shadows a little bit, and I'm going to take up the highlights a little bit. Okay, that's going to add a little contrast. And we could turn that on and off, just that curve. And you can see that the curve, the S curve, the general S curve is giving a little more contrast to it. Okay. Now, if you're not comfortable, you want to learn from doing tone curves, just come down here to where it says point curve and it says custom. Just start out with a linear. Okay, that's a linear curve where it's just straight. Okay, put a little medium contrast and you'll find that it'll draw the S curve for you. Okay, see how it did an S curve? And you could turn that on and off and say, okay, oh, I see, that's giving me that nice little thing. And you can go and you go, I want a really strong contrast. And now you can see it's deepened the curve. And again, you can do the before and the after. Okay, so I know a lot of people don't understand the tone curve real well. And, that's understandable. It's intimidating. But it's really no different than the histogram. Once you understand that the left side is the blacks, and then the shadows, and then the exposure, then the highlights, and then the whites as you progress right, it's the exact same thing. So you know where you're affecting. Example here. I'm with a traditional S curve, okay, making a strong contrast. If I were to take this point here, we all know that this point now, we've learned that that's the blacks, okay? Now, next over is the shadows, okay? So if I take this point here that's on the blacks, and I raise it up, what do you think that's going to do to the blacks? Okay? It's going to fade them, okay? It's going to take away and not do a traditional curve, okay? So it actually takes the blacks away from it, okay? And again, don't be afraid to play, okay, with it. Do not be afraid to play. Okay, so on and off, that's good. And also turn around and see what's happened by applying these curves. You see, look, my tree is getting a lot of that black tone, which I didn't want in the first place. Okay, so you may have to go back up and make readjustments on it. Okay, we already have our shadows at over at 100%, and it's still pulling in some blacks. Okay, maybe I need to move my blacks or increase my blacks up or increase them down. Okay, till I get a better looking. Okay, so don't be afraid to play and understand. All right, so the last thing to do here is we're in the HSL panel, and this is if you're not happy with a particular color or you want to adjust it a little bit. If you look over at the far hill here across the water, it's a very, what I call a yellowish green. All right, so maybe you want to do some hue and saturation changes. Okay, maybe you want to change the hue of this to darken it. That take the tool and click in the area that you want to adjust. Okay, and just pick it, and then you could go up and down. See how I'm doing that? I'm dragging the mouse and it's changing the hue as I go. Okay, now big yellows, and now I'm more green. Okay. So just play with that and you can do adjustments. Okay. And you can turn them on and off, and you can see how I've increased the green a little bit in the system. Saturation. Okay. Same thing. You can increase the saturation by clicking and then coming in and selecting an area that you want to affect. And you can come in and affect the yellows and the greens here and come in and fade them out, right? Again, you're taking saturation in this case away. So if you have an area that's overly saturated, you can make adjustments. Okay? And so there, I'm localizing a color change. Okay. Color grading. For this particular thing as a landscape, we generally wouldn't color grade it. This is basically if you want to put some colors, some blues into the highlights or some greens into the shadows and so forth like that. But we don't want to do anything that on the landscape. So then we come in and sharpening. I don't do sharpening at all in post-processing. I save that for the output. Okay, so when I'm exporting this photo out, then I'll apply sharpening. But I don't do it within the post-processing process. I leave sharpening completely off. Okay? But I will demonstrate it for you here for purposes in case you do choose to sharpen your thing. You could select the amount, and by default, I think it puts 25% or so on the image. Okay? And when you sharpen, you've got to sharpen at 100%. Okay? If you don't do that, you're not going to be able to see what you're doing. It'll be deceptive. Okay? So zoom into 100%. So go into view and then go to 100%. Now this is going to give you got your hands so you can drag it around. This is so you could see what you're doing. Okay, on it. How much you want to do, and then your radius, how short, how much detail, and your masking. A lot of people don't understand the masking, so I'll explain that here. Basically, masking is saying sharpen these areas, but not these areas, right? So if I hold the Alt-Option key down and then I drag the masking, you can see I turn into a black and white wonderland, okay, as I drag it over. But this is giving you a world of information. This is telling you, hey, I want to sharpen where it's white. I don't want any sharpening where it is black. Okay, and I can drag it back and forth. If I leave it all over here, what does that mean? That means we're sharpening the image completely, every part of it. Now, do I really want sharpening in clouds? No, I don't, because that'll make the clouds look artificial and crunchy, and you just don't want that. So I use the masker by hitting Alt-Option by doing, and now I can pull out so that it is not sharpening the clouds. Okay? Now the sharpening is just going to be on the areas there. And again, if you need to things, just use your Alt-Option key, hold it in, and you could see that we're sharpening. So we're sharpening the edges of the branches, we're sharpening the cross, but we are not sharpening the sky. So if I hit Alt-Option here, and you can see we're not sharpening the sky at all. Okay? All right. So there we go. We really don't have any noise to worry about. And so we're basically done with this image. So let's see the before and after. Okay, I'm going to put us back to 100%. And let's see the before or after. The before. Okay. And the after. Okay. Now, overall processing for this image, I'm done. I'm happy. Okay. The other thing you want to do is you say, is this photo need me to direct the eye for the viewer? And it's possible that I do. I want their focus to be on this cross as my subject. Now, there's enough going on in this photo that the eye is drawn there, but if I wanted to put an additional drawing into it, okay, I would make the subject brighter and the background darker, okay, because the human eye is drawn to light. Now, I could do a post-crop vignetting, all right, and so start out to do this, take it all the way, hard all the way over so it's really obvious, okay? And you'll notice now, just by doing that, isn't your eye drawn to the cross now more than the other parts of the photo? That's the purpose of it, okay? Now, the midpoint is where is that happening, okay? Where is the location of it, okay? So I'm putting it really tight in there. The roundness, all right? How round is it I'm doing, right? And maybe I want to do it severely rounded, right? And the feather, okay? How feather I want the thing, and I want it feathered really good. And the highlight, again, if I want to mess with the highlights into it. So now that I've gone the extreme and I have the location of where I want the vignette, now I'm just going to back off the amount, okay? And I'm going to keep reducing the amount, all right? This is what I'm going to tell you, and try to take this to heart. It's subtlety that wins the game, okay? It's subtlety. I'm going to turn it on and off. Now look at the frame. See how the vignette is not really visible, but it is visible, and how much of an impact it makes? That helps your eye being restrained from the edges and brought to the subject. Okay? So, again, without and with. Okay? Without, with. And you can see the amount is only at 15. Okay? And so subtlety always wins the race. And you make better photo editing by doing that. Okay, guys. So, thanks for staying with me. Hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully picked up a few tricks here or there for your photo editing. Until next week, you guys take care.